Hello, DawgNation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is a special Kroger commitment video taking a look at Jalen Hayward, the number 34 prospect in the entire country, who just mere moments ago has announced his commitment to the University of Georgia. See a nice-looking edit there of Hayward there in the jersey, the red jersey, the same one that Georgia wore on its national championship night the other night. So the bottom line is the overall point. Things are very, very good around Georgia right now. Tomorrow will be a celebration inside Sanford Stadium with a parade and dog walk prior to that, honoring the back-to-back national champions. We say around here back-to-back Dog National Champions after the Go for 2 and 22 season that just took place. And Georgia now adds to what was already the number one class in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports composite ranking there as well, as Hayward joins the fold here. Number 34 prospect nationally. He's number 3 at his position, and, of course, number 9 in the state of Florida. And I can't help but wonder, after a year in which Georgia dominated the state of Florida in recruiting in a way that the in-state state university, the Gators, could only dream of, you have to wonder, is this kind of setting the stage for more in-state victories for Georgia in the state of Florida, and whether anybody there in the Sunshine State can do anything to keep pace with all of this. Obviously, we also know how important the safety position has been for Georgia here, with Christopher Smith bringing his Georgia career to an end, doing so in kind of all-American fashion, and really a guy that I think will stand up as one of the best safeties this program has ever had, and certainly among the very best players that Kirby Smart has had in his tenure as Georgia coach, which dates back to 2016. Next to Christopher Smith on the field this year at the safety spot, you had Malachi Starks. Malachi, a 5-star signee as a part of the 2022 class, and a guy that really ranked near the top for Georgia in terms of total snaps played, a guy who has a very bright future ahead of him at UGA, will now be transitioning to that kind of bigger role now, in kind of the lead role that Smith was in this year, that Lewis Cine had been in prior to that Richard LeCount had been in prior to that J.R. Reed would have been in prior to that. All of a sudden, Malachi Starks kind of slides into that here for this year. And you're left to wonder, well, what does that mean about the other safety position then? You know, a guy like Janelle Aguero comes in as a freshman. Will he find his way on the field, much the same way that Starks did here this year? And obviously, Georgia incredibly deep at the overall defensive secondary position group. Clearly an amazing signing class for Georgia going back to 2022. But we've also seen some of the cornerbacks from that class, they've left. Jaheim Singletary has now officially entered into the transfer portal. It had been reported yesterday he was going to. He's now officially entered into the transfer portal. And there's some thought of, well, could there be someone else along the way that gets a chance to do that? But obviously Georgia still remains very deep in that defensive secondary position. But safety in particular, though, is going to have an extra spotlight on that because of the contribution that a guy like Smith has made. Now moving on. So when you think about future Georgia teams as a part of this 2024 class, you think about a guy like Hayward here, a major win for the Dogs, and a guy who also stands now as the 8th commitment to Georgia for its 2024 class. So that's the story. We're talking about what this means here. We're going to be joined by Jeff Sentell coming up in just a minute. So big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making all this possible. And don't forget, Kroger Chef Jr. also available for you here right now as well. Big opportunity to be a part of that here coming up a couple of weeks from now. The final time for this month, anyway, to experience Kroger Chef Jr. That's the 21st. I think that's the Saturday, January 21st there on that. It's the dumpling sandwich. I do know this. That's the special item you get a chance to make here this particular month. The dumpling sandwich with you and your child, for your child, it's just $7 per child. Not only do you make the great food item, but you also get a chance to get some cool paraphernalia to go along with that, like the chef's hat, the apron, the patch, the dumpling maker, recipe card box, and things like that. So Kroger Chef Jr. to find out more about that. Of course, the word junior spelled out Junior. KrogerChefJr.com for more on that. Do we have Jeff Sentell with us ready to go? So let's see if we can find out what Jeff has got going on. We'll hear him and get his thoughts on Hayward in just a moment. We had a chance to talk to Jeff about this earlier today on DawgNation Daily. And obviously, as you're thinking about, Hayward here playing that safety spot for Georgia, I guess it also kind of leads to some curiosity as well about another potential defensive back prospect who could be joining the program. Still waiting on news about the possibility of a guy like, say, Deion Smoke Bowie, former 5-star that kind of got away from Georgia going back to that class of 2022. He's from Bainbridge, Georgia, Kirby Smart's hometown. At one point in time was thought to have a very good relationship with Georgia commit, and then eventually leaves that pledge, ends up at Texas A&M, as so many guys in that 2022 class could tell a similar story on. A&M does not become a permanent home, Bowie in the transfer portal. So in the aftermath of that, there's been some thought, well, that Georgia and Bowie would still be closely connected here. So while Hayward is kind of a long-range answer here, eventually arriving at Georgia as a part of this 2024 class, there is also thought that Georgia could get some immediate help at this position, or at least a similar position, at some point in time in 2023 if a guy like Deion Smoke Bowie would become the third player to transfer to Georgia during this open portal season. So there is a lot of player movement going on across the board here right now. It did become official a little earlier today as well that MJ Sherman, the outside linebacker, he is entering the transfer portal. There had been some chatter about this in the last couple of days prior to that, that he might not, that he might stay, that he might not go into the transfer portal. Yet ultimately it does become official now. Sherman is doing that. You'll also add to that there as well the Tresman Marshall, Georgia linebacker, is into the transfer portal. So there is a lot of movement ongoing here. But the news of the immediate present is the addition of a major recruit here for the class of 2024, as Jalen Hayward has committed out of Rockledge, Florida. A big get here for these Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to try to, the eighth commitment. Yeah. Pardon me? Okay, yeah, so now Georgia, so Hayward is the eighth member of the 2024 class, but also there are now 8 dogs in the transfer portal, which thus far I don't know that anything has happened from a transfer portal standpoint that stands as all that shocking or anything too crazy as of yet. I mean, you wish guys well when they do move on, and in this particular case, I don't see anything that's happening that's necessarily surprised all that many fans. And obviously, Georgia utilizing the portal itself to bring guys in. So we're in the midst of the guys cycling out of the program, guys cycling into the program, and obviously we're trying to follow all of that. And Jeff Sintel will help us do that here coming up in just a moment. And while we're waiting on Jeff, it'll also give me a chance to kind of pop over and get a few of your comments here right now on this Kroger Commitment Special, as Jalen Hayward has joined up for the class of 2024. So live on video here for a moment. We'll get a chance to do that. Antonio Jones says some of the news we could see coming, Georgia's loaded, and with the commitment of Hayward, you also start to look ahead to a future in which Georgia seems like it's going to be pretty loaded there as well. I said this on DawgNation Daily this morning that some Georgia fans, I think, were kind of wondering a year ago, hey, where's this momentum? Where's this bump that you get for winning the national championship? And Georgia still put together an elite recruiting class, but for a while it sort of seemed like you weren't quite getting the immediate steam from having won that. Kirby Smart himself even said he wasn't sure how much the national championship mattered for a lot of the guys, who were kind of making their choice to come to Georgia, making their choice in that 2023 class. A lot of them weren't quite so sure. He wasn't quite so sure how much the national championship had mattered for all of them. Well, if you wondered that a year ago, I think now you look at a scenario where Georgia does seem to have the kind of recruiting momentum that would be befitting a back-to-back two-time national champion. Not just because of the Hayward commitment here right now, but you've seen some online chatter as of late connecting Georgia with the top quarterback in the class, Dylan Raiola. And you start thinking about some of those 5-star names in state. You're starting to see some movement, it would seem, between Georgia and some of those guys as well, that Georgia has a chance to kind of clean up in state in a way that maybe it did not a year ago too. So there is a lot to like right now about where things are going with the Georgia Bulldogs here. So let's get a couple of your comments, and hopefully we'll hear from Jeff Sintel coming up a little bit later on after that. Hateful on YouTube says, hate to see Singletary and Sherman headed out. Maybe we could hold on to at least one of them, a la Marius Mims. Yeah, we'll find out. Obviously, just because you go in the portal doesn't mean you have to stay there. I don't have any indication that right now either one of those two guys are planning on coming back, but it is fair to point out that the portal provides an opportunity to look around and announce your intention to maybe seek to go somewhere else. But we've seen portal guys before at Georgia who have chosen to stay. You mentioned Marius Mims, who took a high-profile visit to Florida State last year before eventually staying at Georgia. A guy like Robert Beal one time was in the transfer portal there too. But the news of the moment is Jalen Hayward committing to Georgia, number 34 prospect in the country, number 3 safety, number 9 guy out of the Sunshine State. So Jeff Sintel, we talked about this on DawgNation Daily a little earlier today. Thanks for joining us here as a part of this Kroger Commitment Special. Give us a little bit more from your perspective on what Georgia's getting in Hayward.
Yeah, guys. Hey, congratulations. What's the phrase, BA? Cordwood. We got a signal for like cordwood.
That's right.
Somehow, some way, this program already has the nation's #2 safety in Peyton Woodyard. Oh, well, why don't we just throw the #3 safety on the Barbie here? That is Jalen AP Hayward. They call him AP because he used to run the rock like Adrian Peterson back in the day in Little League ball. Brandon, this kid is fast. He's about 6 feet and some change, 180, seen as a versatile player. He's been timed at 10.68 seconds in the 100 meters. Brandon, that is very fast. I don't need to tell you that. And really, Brandon, he's been committed silently to the Dogs for some time. It was funny. He told me that he was just like watching the national championship with his coaches and his family. And he's like, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Watching that, watching TCU, watching the Dogs pop off. He was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's become a Dog. And he makes that commitment today from Rockledge High School. Brandon, that's now four top 50 prospects already for the nation's #1 class in 2024. That's 6 top 100 prospects in 2024. Georgia is comfortably the #1 school in the country right now by the 24/7 Sports composite rankings. And wow, stop the press, breaking news, the Dogs are #1 in something else right now as well.
No doubt about that. And you talk about the fact that he is paired now with another elite safety in Peyton Woodyard. And this is what Georgia kind of attempted to do last cycle with Janelle Aguero and Caleb Downs, and maybe just missed out on that. So I guess let's talk about this pair together here in this class, and how would you compare what Hayward does well to what Woodyard also does well too? How do you compare and contrast these two players who, as you said, are already a part of the 8 commitments that Georgia now has to the class of 2024?
Yeah, I think Woodyard, Brandon, is a guy that could come down. He's probably, 6'1", already close to 195. Hayward's not as big. He's about 180-ish. I think Woodyard would be a 3-down safety. Be very interesting to see what Georgia does with Jonell Aguero, Brandon, in the 2023 cycle. I'm looking at Aguero and thinking, can he do some of those things that Javon Bullard does? Can he come down and maybe play some linebacker? Aguero is so very physical. One of the things, and Georgia beats Alabama for the record. They beat Ohio State. They beat those stinking Gators for the record as well. Raise a glass to that one, my friend. But
always,
what they do here is they get a guy that is really a versatile safety, a guy that can play all over the back end, cover skills, a guy that could maybe play some star, maybe play some nickel, maybe can play all over the thing. And especially with that type of speed, Jalen Hayward is now going to be quite cozy in the secondary room in Athens.
And I guess let's just, pay a little bit of lip service to this too about how important the safety position is for Georgia, that these great Georgia defenses always seem to have really great safeties. I don't know how high Christopher Smith's going to be drafted, but I do know this. He's an All-American player. We know Lewis Cine on last year's team was a first-round pick. Richard LeCount, when he was healthy at Georgia, was always one of the most important parts of this defense. J.R. Reed is a former first-team All-American too, that somehow, and the X's and O's folks can kind of tell you why, but somehow that the great Georgia defenses always seem to include great safety play. That's a prerequisite for what Georgia seems to want to do. So, how does a guy like Hayward fit into the fact that, this is just a Georgia team that always seems to have that elite back-end player as a part of what they do well?
Yeah, I think a common thread here, Brandon, is body type. Chris Smith, we know it. Chris Smith wasn't a huge guy. Agent Alpha wasn't a huge guy. In high school, he was actually ranked as a corner. The same thing for Richard LeCount, same thing for J.R. Reed. And what Georgia does is they kind of muscle up these 180-pound bodies and kind of turn them into 200-pound safeties that are great ball hawks, great playmakers, guys that can run the alley and strike guys with great technical skill. Brandon, this is another prospect that simply raves right now, I guess, about the trinity of Georgia defensive backs coaches. That's Fran Brown, that's Will Muschamp, and that's Kirby Smart. Brandon, you want to talk about safety? Why don't we add this one to the mixture here as well? When you see the safeties that Georgia's bringing in, All-Americans, what they've done with Chris Smith, Lewis Cine, first-round draft picks, and now what they have there with Kirby Smart, former safety, Will Muschamp, former safety, and then Fran Brown. They've got a lot of things that they like there about the young men that are that are leading these young men in Athens that will play the safety position.
So let me ask you about that. Go ahead. I'm
Dogs are
sorry.
already great. Dogs got a lot better with this one than Jalen Hayward.
So I want to get some more, clarification on this. So in a situation like this, obviously Muschamp is the position coach, but it does seem like a lot of times we hear about Fran Brown being an impact player too in these kinds of recruiting situations. Is that kind of the way this goes? That if you're a guy like Hayward here, you're going to be influenced by both Brown, even though he's kind of the cornerbacks coach, and Muschamp there as well. And obviously, Kirby's history, speaks on this too. But is a guy like Brown still going to be influential in recruitments like this, even though he's not technically the position coach for Hayward?
I think so. What Brown's done is built a lot of great relationships with a lot of recruits. Ellis Robinson's a great example, Brandon. He's the number one prospect in the country at cornerback. And Fran Brown's emphasis, he coaches the corners for Georgia, whereas Kirby and Muschamp take care of the safeties. But it is really just pedigree, man. Georgia, of all the many things that Georgia has going for it, everyone knows that Kirby was a safety and an all-SEC safety. And they know that Kirby watches over and trains and shepherds those safeties like they're his own, because that's the position he patrolled and he manned at Georgia. They know that Georgia's always going to have some dogs at safety, and they're always going to get some great elite coaching. Everybody calls – I was talking to Hayward this week, and he called Muschamp a super smart defensive coordinator, loves everything about the program, can't wait to go play and be a dog. And Brandon, this is another early enrollee as well. He had more than 40 offers. The 37th offer was from the University of Georgia. And when that one came, Brandon, it was almost a wrap.
So let me also bring you on some of the other news of the day here right now. We've got a couple of more official names in the transfer portal. Singletary had essentially been treated it was official, but now it is official. Jaheim Singletary is in the transfer portal. Tresman Marshall goes in there today. Jacob Hood goes in there. MJ Sherman, after a little bit of back and forth about whether he would or he wouldn't be a transfer candidate, now is officially in the transfer portal. That has been reported. I guess all this adds up to 8 total dogs currently in the portal. I guess what do you make about this part of it, too, as players are coming in, both in the final stage of the 2023 class, Georgia's own efforts to bring in transfer players. Eventually it's going to be 2024 guys there as well, which is what the main purpose of this video is. But how about the guys that we now can add to the list that will be exiting Georgia here? I guess the latest of that, MJ Sherman, just a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah, Brent, we all have our internal calculus, and I thought the number – especially with a guy like, for instance, Jonel Aguero, he won't show up until January the 14th, which is like right now, So it gives Georgia a little bit of time before those guys can move in and they can be enrolled and begin classes. I thought the number Georgia needed to get to was 11 or 12, depending on a scholarship here and there. And you see Georgia quickly working to do that. I think there'll be more names that are going to be announced over the next 24 hours as Georgia tries to get a few more in under that list. You see some offensive linemen that I think maybe a defensive lineman here or there.
I can also tell you this, Jeff, this is official now too, although not surprising in any form or fashion. Broderick Jones is officially declared for the NFL draft. I think he's going to be a very attractive draft prospect. That's also now official there as well. Jones on his way to the NFL draft.
Yeah, and I would say McClendon would be a guy I would look to see there as well. Everybody's going to wonder and what's going to happen with Cedric Von Granger. That's one of those big potential run-it-back names. Will SVPG go be a second or third round pick of the NFL, or will he come back to Georgia? Such an incredible young man there. Great ambassador, great personal profile, great representative of the university there as well. You've got a couple offensive linemen, you got a couple defensive linemen, you got players, Brandon. When you just simply look at what Georgia has stacked.
Did we lose Jeff? Okay, we lost Jeff. We're coming up to the end of this video anyway. So that's the story on all of this. Georgia gets a huge addition to the class of 2024. And this is a big one, y'all. And this is one of those things where you can't get too lost in all the news that you kind of miss the forest for the trees. I mean, Georgia's added the number 3 safety in the country here today, number 34 prospect overall. Trust me when I tell you, that's going to be a very, very big addition to Georgia eventually, as Jalen Hayward out of Rockledge, Florida, has committed to Georgia. Don't forget tomorrow with the celebration, there's a major list of recruits on hand. You can go to here, DawgNation Daily from earlier today to kind of find out more about Ellis Robinson. Those guys were expected to be there for that. We've also seen the Georgia coaches today traveling around. 10 coaches making 10 stops. I believe that's 100 total schools they will then be visiting, and so that's been fun to watch. And so you can read more about that there at DawgNation.com there as well. We just want to kind of pop on for a minute, give you a little bit of immediate reaction. Georgia adds Jalen Hayward. That's big news. Georgia coaches all over the place across the state here right now, hosting recruits tomorrow for the championship celebration. If you're going to be there in Athens tomorrow, make sure you find us, say hello to us. We'd love to shake your hand and just sort of take a moment to celebrate what has been an awesome, awesome national championship season. Go for 2 in 22. Georgia got 2 in 22. They are the back-to-back Dog National Champions. And go for 2 in 22 is a mission complete there for UGA. And by the way, the 2024 signing class, it's off to a pretty good start here, too. 8th commitment here today, and it is a big one. Jalen Hayward commits. Read more from Jeff on that at DawgNation.com. Enjoy your weekend here, too, and then we'll see you back in the same studio Monday for DawgNation Daily at that point in time. And, of course, in Athens tomorrow. Have a great weekend, everybody.